This video is sponsored by Datacamp. Hello beautiful people, welcome to the one and only Flutter Web course you will ever need to take. I still remember when I was trying to learn Flutter Web myself and I couldn't find any good courses out there because the majority of the content is outdated or just not good enough. But this course is different, trust me. On this course, I will teach you Flutter Web as I build one of my clients' projects, so you are going to learn from a real-life project. And here we are going to build an admin panel. We will start this course by discussing when and when not to use Flutter Web, and then we will move to one of the most important topics in web design, which is responsive design. I will show you some tips and tricks on how to find the perfect breakpoints for your web apps. You will learn about custom navigation or local navigation using Flutter Defaults Navigator, and you're going to mix that with a global navigation using the getX package. And talking about getX, you will learn, or I will teach you how to manage the state of your web apps using getX. And we are going to use getX to keep track of items being hovered, active routes, active items, and so much more. You will also learn about advanced URL navigation in Flutter Web and how to handle undefined routes using 404 error pages or returning 404 pages every single time the user tries to access a route that it's not defined. You will also have an introduction to Firebase for Flutter Web. You are going to learn how to integrate Firebase authentication, Google Sign In, Google Sign Up on your Flutter website. And these are just some of the topics that I cover on this course. And what's even better is that this course is progressive. That basically means that I will be adding more content over time and updating the content as the content gets outdated. My goal here is to ensure that this will really be the one and only Flutter Web course you will ever need. Now, who is this course for? This course is for people that are already familiar with Flutter. We will not be covering basic concepts such as widgets, what's a state, columns, rows, and all of those basic concepts. So prior to enrolling into this course, make sure that you're already familiar with Flutter. You don't have to be an advanced developer in any ways, but definitely you must be familiar with Flutter and comfortable working with the technology. If that's all right for you and you are excited, see you guys inside. Before we start this course, a small word from the sponsors of today's video, Datacamp. Datacamp is an online learning platform that makes it easy to acquire data skills. Learn at your own pace with interactive courses and hands-on exercises. No previous data skill is required to get you started. Datacamp has courses for all different skill levels. I would recommend you to take this Introduction to Python course to get you started and to check the platform out. With Datacamp, you'll learn directly from your browser because it doesn't require any extra software. And you can take free assessments, which gives you a personalized learning recommendation. If you want to stand out from the crowd, increase your chances of landing a job on this extremely hot field, and learn from experts actually working on the field, Datacamp is the way to go. Sign up using the link in the description, and if you do so, all first chapters of Datacamp's courses will be free of charge, and you'll be supporting the channel as well, so thank you very much. On this video, I will just be giving you tips on how to make the most out of this course, right? First, the very first advice or tip for you guys is code along. As you watch the videos, code along because that's the best way for you to learn, right? Now, how to get help, and this is very important. We have the project here, Flutter Web Dashboard, on my GitHub, and now I will link this project. Right. If you're facing problems, you can just open an issue here. Me or other students can assist you here with your problems. And I would highly recommend you guys to have your GitHub repos and have your projects on your Git repos so that when nobody is able to help you, at least you can share the GitHub link with me so that I can access and try to run it on my personal computer and help you guys troubleshoot like that. Because usually people send screenshots and it's very hard to troubleshoot a problem using screenshots. It's even sometimes impossible, right? And the third way of getting help obviously is asking a question and on the Q&A section. Another thing that I think is very important for you guys to know is that, as I told you, this course is not for beginners in Flutter, so you must have some knowledge of Flutter, some kind of Flutter experience, right? Because some parts of the course where there is a lot of code repetition, where we are just building widgets, I increased the speed of the lesson, right? So those were the tips that I thought would be very important for you guys to have before we start the course. Guys, as the majority of us already know, Flutter Web is stable. From the version 2.0 onwards, Flutter Web comes included with the default Flutter project. And now you might be tempted to start using Flutter Web for every single project you build. And I wouldn't really advise you to do that right now. And remember that this will definitely change in the future, but as per now, June 2021, I still wouldn't use Flutter Web for every single project. So when to use Flutter Web? The simple answer for me would be, I would use Flutter Web for projects that do not have to score a high SEO. If you don't know what SEO is, this stands for search engine optimization, right? So for example, if you go to Google, depending on where you are at the moment, these results here may be different, right? So these websites are optimized to be shown first when people search for house rental, right? For example, if you search for Facebook, the very first link will be the official Facebook website. So if you're looking for websites, let's say our e-commerce website at this moment that you would want to show every single time a user searches for shoes, for example, I wouldn't use Flutter Web on that example at the moment. At the moment, I wouldn't use it. And I would use Flutter Web for projects like admin dashboards, because admin dashboards don't even appear on Google searches normally. So it doesn't matter how the SEO of the website is. And every single type of website that it doesn't matter how it appears on Google or in terms of the position, I would use Flutter Web for that. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back. On this video, we will talk about responsive design, right? On very simple terms, responsive design, or saying that a website is responsive, basically means that the website looks good on a variety of screen sizes. It doesn't matter if it's as small as a mobile phone or as wide or large as a wide screen monitor, right? And this is extremely important for the user experience of the platform. You don't want to have a large screen size website on a mobile device, right? Usually when you are designing responsive websites, there's these things called breakpoints. Breakpoints are screen sizes where you define different looks. I don't know if that was easy to understand, but basically let's have this as an example here. We have a large screen size, we have medium, we have small, right? You can forget about custom at the moment. But here, for example, you can set some logic that if the screen is large, the window will look a certain way. If it's a medium size, the window will look a certain way. If it's a small size screen, the window will look a different way, right? These numbers are not just random numbers. There's a website that it's called Stat Counter, and on this website you can see the screen size, the most popular screen sizes based on the date and the location. This is a must-have asset, right? At the moment we have the 1920 resolution as being the most popular, followed by the 1366, right? So here you would define if you intend to have your platform on large screens, if you want them to for medium screens. These are usually laptop resolutions, and these are like large screens desktop resolution, right? So this website is a must-have if you want to design your website responsively to find the breakpoints. And even if you're just designing, let's say, a tablet application, you can use this website. Select the device, and here you can have the most common breakpoints or resolutions for tablet devices, right? So this was kind of a tip video, something I wanted you guys to know, and use this resource very, very, very much. It's going to be extremely helpful for you guys. Now, this was basically it in terms of the initial tips that I wanted to give you guys. Now we can start working on our project. Well, on this video, we are going to talk about Flutter project structure. And remember that this is not specific for Flutter web. Any Flutter project, being it a mobile or web, can use the same project structure, right? So if you create your Flutter project, if your Flutter version is bigger than Flutter 2.0, you automatically will have the Flutter web directory here. So you have to do nothing. You do not have to configure web because web comes with Flutter. If you are running on a previous version, you'll have to run, let me open the terminal. You'll have to run this command here to enable Flutter web, Flutter create. So this is everything you need to do, right? So after we have that out of the way, you already have Flutter web enabled on your project. Let's talk project structure, right? And this is the structure that I personally use for my projects, right? Everything goes inside the lib folder. Actually, not everything, because outside the lib folder we will have the assets folder, but that's not for now. You know, for the moment, every single thing, it's going to go into our lib folder. So let's start adding some directories here. So this is the project structure I usually use. I will just explain what each of these directories will store. First, we have the constants, and as the name suggests, the constants directory will store constant files with constant values. For example, some global constant values, and everything will go into here. Now we have the controllers. Again, for this project, we are going to use the getX architecture. And when you are working with getX with Flutter, you will need the controllers here. And then we have the helpers. And here we are going to store files with functions that are useful throughout the app. For example, the responsive widget, it's going to be stored here. And the local navigator logic as well, it's going to be stored here. And then we have here the pages, which are basically the website pages. Usually when I'm building mobile apps, I call this directory screens. And we have routing here. I do not have this in every single project. I only use routing when I know that I will do some navigation manually. That's why we have routing here. And we have widgets, which are global widgets that are going to be used in more than one screen in the project. And then we have here our main, which is the first file where all of the magic starts, right? So a brief overview, this is it. This is the project structure that we are going to use for this project. Before you watch this video, I would like to let you guys know that this is a chopped up version of this video that I have on my YouTube channel. If you want to fully understand how GetX works, you can watch this video and you can read the documentation. It's very easy to understand and easy to implement, so you can use these resources before you proceed if you never worked with GetX before. So guys, this is the default project you get when you create your Flutter app, and now we are going to integrate the GetX ecosystem into the project. The first thing to do here is to create a new folder, call it controllers, and I create another folder, let's call it screens. Now use the link in the description to go to the GetX package URL, copy the dependency or the package, come back to your project, open pubspec.yaml, and we are going to add this dependency into our Flutter project. After doing that, we are going to create a new file, call it counter controller, that's going to keep track of the counter. And inside of the file, we are going to define our class counter controller, which extends getX controller. In here, we are going to have our int controller, but since we want to know when the value of the variable changes, we are going to turn this variable into an observable. It sounds difficult, but it's very simple. Instead of having int here, we'll have var counter is equal 0.obs. OBS makes the integer an observable, right? And in here, we are going to write our method to increment our observable. Basically, we have here increment counter plus plus. Again, for every single variable or value that you want to keep track of its value, you have to turn that into an observable. Now let's go back to our main.dart, remove this widget here, import get, and we need to convert the material app into get material app. Basically, we do this so that we can change screens without using the build context of the app. We can change screen from anywhere inside of the code. Now let's create our home screen. So it's home.dart, and a second screen we are going to call other screen in this case. And now for our home screen, this is going to be a stateless widget, so we need to import flutter material.dart, and we need to import get.dart as well. Call it home screen. Right here, we want to return our scaffold, and as the body of the scaffold, we are going to have a column. Main axis alignment of the column is going to be center, so that every single widget inside of the column will be centered. Now here we can have the children of our column, which is a list of widgets, obviously. Here, let's have a text that displays the counter value. So now we have to register our controller before we use it. So we have here counter controller, which has to be a final. Okay, counter controller is going to be equal to get.put, and we use put to register our controllers. And inside of put, we have to pass our class controller. Now here inside of our widget, we can access the value of our counter by doing counter controller dot counter dot value. Now in here we can add a sized box to give it a bit of height. And finally, let's create a button that will allow us to change screens. Here, the other screen is going to be a stateless widget as well, and call it other screen. Again, we are doing this so that I can show to you guys how the process of changing screens without using context works. Here we are going to return a scaffold as well, and as the body of the scaffold we are going to have a column, and the same story here, we are going to have a text and then a button. Now the good thing is, after you have registered your controller, to access it you just have to do get.find, right? And getX automatically will assign this variable to the controller you have registered, as long as they have the same type. And here we can simply do controller.counter.value. Let's make sure everything is centered. And again, we are going to create a button that will allow us to go back to our previous screen when we want. So let's just copy this and paste it here. Size the widget. And here, to go back, we just do get.back. This simple. We do not need to specify the context, and this is only possible if you use get material app. So don't forget to change material app with get material app. Now to go to that screen, we have to do get to, and here the screen name. Now change this here, and the home is going to be home screen. Now if you run the app, you are going to have something like this, which is not exactly how I expected it to look. No problem. Let's go back to our home screen and center the text and the button widgets. And now let's add a float action button to actually increment the value of our counter. Now, if you look at the app, we have here our float action button, but it doesn't update the UI. So to fix that, we have to remove the top level widget. And here we are going to return an object from getX called obx. And this takes a method that has to return a widget, and the widget that we are going to return is the column, right? Hopefully it wasn't very complicated to understand, but basically you have to wrap everything inside of obx, and now when you click, the counter actually changes. And if you click on open, you can see that the value here on the other screen is updated as well. So this is basically it, and this is the basic example of using state management and route management using getX. Hello beautiful people, welcome back to the class. Well, this video is about how to get help. It doesn't matter how good I am at explaining, eventually you will find some errors or things will not work the way you intend them to do, and you will need some help. And there's two ways of going about doing that. One, you can ask in the Q&A section, but most likely I will need to see the code that you guys have. So it's extremely important for you to use any type of version control system. Usually people use GitHub because it's the most popular, right? So when you create the project, make sure you create a GitHub or a Git repo, so that every time you need me or someone else to help you, you can just send the link, something like this, for example. So let's imagine this one is your project, doesn't matter. Okay, you will have something similar to this. So when you're facing an error, you just have to push your code, and you can share the link, just copying the link here, and every time I ask for the Git link, you can copy and paste. Unfortunately, version control is not part of the class, is not the goal, and I don't want to stretch this one very long. But if you do not know how to use Git, make sure you watch some YouTube videos. They will teach you how to use Git. It's super simple. You only need like 5 to 10 minutes to learn how to use it, and that's it. So guys, if we take some time to have a look at our final design, we have something like this. And from this design, I think it's very easy to see how the site is structured, right? But if it's not, I have something to assist us. We have this section here, the main section. We have our side menu, and we have our top navigation bar. So this is the basic site layout, right? And this will change obviously if we go to smaller screens like mobile phone screen, but that's for another video, right? Now I can hide this and we can clearly see that this is the structure of our website, right? So we want to do this in Flutter and make sure that this is going to be responsive, right? It doesn't matter if the user uses a laptop, uses a very huge monitor. You should always follow this structure here. Now again, here is where we are going to have the actual pages, and when we start working with page routing, the only thing that we are going to change is this. So we do not want to reload the whole page. That's why we are structuring the website like this, because when, for example, the user clicks on drivers or clicks on one of the side menu items, we do not want to reload all of these. We only want to change the content here, and that's the reasoning behind using this layout here. Now enough talking, let's do this using Flutter. And the first step, or the first thing that we will do, is creating this section here, and afterwards we are going to add our top navigation bar. So let's start with this. And now to start things off here in the project, you will want to clear everything inside of the main file, and by doing so you are going to have this error here with the test directory, and the only thing to do here is just deleting this because we are not going to use it anyways. So now the test directory is deleted, and the second thing we will want to do here is add some libraries here, or dependencies, right? And I will add here all of the dependencies that we are going to use for this particular project. And depending on when you watch this video, you may need to update these dependencies to the latest version, right? So the first one is Google Fonts, and this is super nice because it allows you to use custom fonts inside of the app, custom Google fonts, right? And this is a very simple approach in changing fonts in Flutter apps, because if you don't want to do it like this, you would have to download the fonts and then import the font files into the asset folder and then use that way, and that's a bit complicated or complex for some people. So it's easier to just use this charts Flutter, and this package here will allow us to create charts inside of our dashboard. Get, which is the getX basically dependency, and data table too, and this is everything that we need actually in terms of dependencies. Now just control save this and everything will be done for you. Now coming back to our main.dart file, I decided to clean everything and start from scratch so that you guys can see what's happening and understand. Here, first of all, we need to create our main our main function, because it's where the code starts. The execution of the project starts here. So Well, I believe that this is nothing new to you guys, so I'll just continue here creating our default stateless widget and everything. Now, the first thing that we're going to do differently here is that normally you would have material app here, but since we are using the getX architecture, we are going to use get material app. So for the moment, this still looks familiar. Other than changing the material app widget to get material, nothing else is going to change. Now here, we are going to add some theme to our app. First, let's define a background color. Now, when it comes to the text theme, this project uses a custom font. So that's when Google Fonts comes in handy, because we can just do Google Fonts and call the font that we want to use. So now we have some custom fonts into the project. We are using the Malish font with the black color, right? And this is very nice to do like this, because we will not have to be changing this frequently inside of our code. Now, the second thing that we want to do here is to change the default transactions, page transactions. And finally, we are going to change our primary color. Well, now that you guys understood the layout of the website, let's actually start building this in Flutter. First of all, let's create a new file called site layout. So we have here layout.dart. So what happened here is we created our site layout, and now we have here defined our site layout as the home of our get material widget. Now let's work with our site layout. So here we have our site layout. We have the default app bar, which is going to be the top navigation bar. And now we have a row. If we go back to our design, we can see that basically this is what we have here. We have a row here and we have our top navigation bar here. There's something I want you guys to notice, which is this row, or the body of our scaffold, is divided into 6 sections with equal size, right? So the side menu will take only one of those columns, and the rest, the body, is going to take the 5 remaining columns. Now in terms of code, this is how you would do that. So this is basically the same as this. We are saying that this section of the code will take 5 columns and this will take 1 column, and the default value is 1, right? Now what we are going to do is actually running this code to see how it looks on our web browser. Here we have the app on the browser, and this is the layout. This layout is the same as this one. So this is what we wanted, right? But there is a small problem. For example, now if we reduce the size of this, you'll see that the website is not responsive. I mean, it is responsive because the sizes do adjust, but this is not a normal, this is the mobile size more or less, but this is not how this is supposed to look on the mobile. So we can see that this row here is only suitable for large screens, but when we are dealing with small screens, this is not suitable. This doesn't look good. So what we have to do now is actually creating 2 widgets, one that is going to be displayed here on large screens, large and medium screens, and the second one for the small screens. So in terms of code, what that means is that we are going to get rid of this, or we are going to make this a different widget called large screen, and we are going to create another widget called small screen as well. If you have a look at our website here, we still have the same things that we had, and if we reduce the size, nothing changes. If you come back to the layout and instead of large screen, you have here small screen, you will notice that the layout of the website changed, which is good. But the problem is, even when the screen is large, the layout still remains for the small screen. We still have the same layout as the small screens, which is not what we want to do here, right? Now, what we need is to have a way of automatically changing the screens from large to small depending on the size of the window on the browser. So this is what we are going to do on our next video, which is building the responsive widget to deal with the responsiveness of our website. On this lesson, we are going to build our responsive widget, basically, which is a base widget that then we can wrap other widgets inside of it to make them responsive, right? And that widget will be present inside of the helpers, but you could just put that inside of the widgets as well, doesn't matter. So here we have our file called responsiveness.dart. Let me close the other ones. And what's different about this is that this is in fact a widget. It's not a method. We are going to use a widget, but inside of this widget, we are going to have different methods that we will access from other widgets as well, right? But what I usually do here at the top, we are going to create constant values with the most common breakpoints, right? Or the breakpoints for a particular project. On this case, we have one breakpoint for large screens, we have one breakpoint for medium screen, small screen, and a custom size, which is specific for this particular project. Now here we have our values, and these values are not just made up. You have to Google for command screens breakpoint, but I showed you how to do that on a previous video. And the 13 and 66 value, usually these are laptops, and everything from this point and every single value that's greater than this one, we are going to consider that a large screen, right? And the custom screen size, this is not needed for every single project you're going to build, but for this particular project, we are going to use this value here. Now, what we want to do here inside of our widget, we want to declare some class properties. And here we have our constructor. Again, for this project, to be honest, we are only going to use the large screen and the small screen, but I decided to add everything so that you can use this widget on future Flutter web projects. The only value that it's required when we call this widget is the large screen. And don't mistake large screen with large screen size. Large screen size is the size of the screen, but large screen or medium screen or small is a widget, right? Now, what we want to do next is we need to create static methods, right? That will tell us if the view, the window size on the browser is small, is medium, is large, or is custom. And this is how we do that. And here we have our static methods that return booleans. The first one basically is checking that if the screen width is smaller than the defined screen size, then it's a small screen. For medium screens, if it's greater or equal to the medium screen size but it's smaller than the large screen, it's a medium screen. If it's larger or equal to the large screen, it's a large screen. And custom size, everything and anything in between the medium screen size and the custom screen size. Now, after having our methods, let's create our build function. Our build method here is super straightforward. We are going to return a layout builder, and our layout builder has this builder function that takes a context and constraints, right? And we are going to use those constraints to decide which type of screen we are going to return. If the maximum width of this layout builder is equal or greater than the large screen, we're returning a large screen. If it's smaller than the large screen but it's equal or greater to the medium screen, we're going to return the medium screen. If the medium screen is null, we're going to return the large screen, and else we return a small screen. If it's null, we return the large screen. This will basically make sure that we will return something every single time. And again, we do not need to have this here. You can just get rid of this. We don't use it anyways. Yeah, so this was basically it for this video. This was the responsive widget, and on the next lesson we are going to implement this. No, as a matter of fact, we are going to implement this right now. Let's wrap it. And the way we would go about doing this, it's not hard. Let's go to our site layout right here. We are going to return responsive widget, and the large screen is going to be equal to the large screen widget. The small screen will be equal to the small screen widget. Now let's run the code and see what happens. So here we have our website, right? And this is a medium screen. And even if we extend the window, the layout doesn't change. Let's see what happens if we shrink it. Okay, we have an error. Let's see what's the problem. the type int, I think I know what's happening. Okay, we're supposed to return a small screen, not small screen size. And make sure when you're returning the small screen, you return the small screen variable. So this small screen is this variable here, but not the original small screen widget. So for both the small screen and the large screen, make sure they both start with a lowercase character, right? Let's test that again. And here you have it. You see how our app changes automatically? And this is the magic of responsiveness. It worked, right? On our next video, we are going to build our top navigation bar here. We're going to create our top navigation bar. See you guys on the next one. So guys, on this video we are going to build our top navigation bar, and if you have a look, this is how it looks, and it's responsive. So if we shrink the screen, you'll see in a minute what happens. You see it changes here. Now we have this menu thing, and this is how it works basically. So our goal for this video is to recreate this logic here. So the process here will be super straightforward. Now to make our structure cleaner, we are going to remove the up bar from here and create a separate file for that. So we are going to call the file top nav, and here instead of returning a stateless widget as we normally do, here we'll have to define a method that returns an up bar. So this is our method, right? It takes a build context and it takes a key, a scaffold key, right? And this is going to be used when we want to do things such as opening the drawer or opening that side menu. That's when we are going to use our scaffold key here. And the context obviously is to know where on which widget we are going to build this app bar. If we pay attention to our design here, we can notice that we are using some custom colors here. These are not default material colors. And if I open here, here we have the colors, right? So what we are going to do actually is using this custom colors inside of our project. And to do that, back to our project, but before, let us just call the top navigation bar here. And here we have defined our scaffold key, and this is what we are going to pass to our method, right? Good. Now let's create some custom colors. Well, I think I might have deleted some files here. but no problem. We are going to create so here inside of style.dart, we are going to define our custom colors and anything and everything related to the style of our project, right? Let's start with this color here. I know it looks like white, but this is not really white. And we are going to call this color and now you may be asking, how are we going to get the values for the color? And we just have to copy the X code here. This is the color code. Just copy the color code and paste it here. Just remember that before you paste the color code, you have to insert 0x, then capital FF, and then you can just paste the color code. I'm going to do the same thing, follow the same process for the remaining colors. So here we have the custom colors. You can pause the video if you want to copy the code. You can pause the video and copy this code here, or you can just copy directly from the repo on GitHub. Now we can go back to our app bar and start styling this. But even before, the last thing we need to do is, I actually already have this new folder called assets, right? And this is the folder, the assets folder. It only contains one file called icons, and inside of icons we have this logo of the app. This is the logo, and the link to download this will be down below, right? Or if you do not want to download the assets file, you can just go to the GitHub and download the image from there as well. But I will add the link to the logo. After you have downloaded, the only thing you have to do is basically just copy and paste that into your project, right? Just copy and paste that into your project and you're going to have something like this. Make sure you copy this to the top level, and sometimes when you try to copy and paste using VS Code, you face some issues. So I would recommend you to go to the original file path or the directory of your project, and right here at the top level you would paste the file, and here you have it. Perfect. After you have all of this in place, the only thing you have to do is go to your pub spec again and add this line, assets icons. So this is important, obviously. If you want to use the image, don't forget to add this line here. Good. After all of this is done, you are basically ready to go. Now, the first thing that we want to do is remember that when we are on a large screen, the first thing we display on our top navigation bar is the logo, but when it's a small screen, we display the menu icon. And to make that possible, we are going to do this. So basically what's happening here, we are saying that if this is a small screen, we want to display the menu icon, the icon button, and if it's a large screen, we will want to display the logo. Now let's run this code. Now let's try, and it didn't work. Can someone guess why? Actually, it didn't work because of my mistake. A small screen is not a screen that it's smaller than the small screen size, but it's small. It has to be smaller than the medium screen size. If it's smaller than the small screen size, it's an extra small screen. And now it works perfectly fine. But if you click on this, nothing happens, and that's because we do not have a drawer yet. So let's create one. And now that we have the drawer, this is basically everything that we had to do. Let's finish creating our top navigation bar. Now, if you pay attention here, I'm trying to use a custom text widget, but this is not a default widget. So we will have to create this widget before we use it. So this is basically it. Here we have our custom text, and now we can start using that here. So that was long, but the widget is done. Now we are running the app to see what happened. And I know that maybe it was too much for some of you guys to take, but in case of any types of questions, feel free to ask me. After you have created the widget, you are going to have something more or less like this. Hopefully you have something exactly like this. And as you can see, this is flexible and it works perfectly fine. Now our drawer still doesn't work, but that's because our drawer widget has no child, and that's something that we are going to fix in a bit. So actually it didn't work, not because the drawer didn't have a child, but because we didn't assign this key to this specific scaffold. So we didn't know which scaffold is the owner of this particular key. So now that we have this key assigned to this scaffold and we are passing this key to our top navigation function, now we can access our drawer just like this. Hello beautiful people, welcome back. On this lesson we are going to build a menu controller, and the menu controller will help us keep track of the items that are active inside of our side menu, and as well as checking the items that are being hovered by the mouse pointer, right? Another thing that the menu controller will do is assigning this icons returning these icons depending on the side menu name. For example, for the drivers, it's going to return this car. For the clients, it's going to return this image here of people, and so on, right? If it's a bit complicated to understand, don't worry about it. You will understand as we write the code. Let's code. Good. To make this possible, the first thing you'll want to do is to actually create what we call routes. Again, on this project, we are going to use two types of navigation: a global navigation using getX, and local navigation using a local navigator, and we are going to use named navigation. The first thing you will want to do is to create the routing directory. You probably already have this. So here inside of our routing directory, we have the routes, and here I will list all of the routes that we are going to need. Now we have here the list of the routes that we are going to use on our project, and depending on the project, these values may change, and even the name of the constants may change depending on the project. Now we are going to create a list, and this list will contain all of the items that we will have inside of the side menu. So here we have the list of side menu item names. If you have a look here at our side menu items, exactly the names that we have here for our side menu items are the same as the routes, right? Apart from the authentication, but we are going to see how this changed from authentication to logout in a minute. But for now, this is everything that you want here, a list of the routes that we are going to use. And now we can actually start working on our menu controller. So here we have our menu controller. First, we are going to create an instance that will allow us to access the value of the menu controller from anywhere inside of our code. Now here we are going to create two variables or two class properties for the item, the active item and the item that is being hovered. Again, if you are not understanding this section, that means that you don't really understand getX. You should go back to my previous video and watch the overview, the getX overview lesson. That would be super important for you to understand from this point onwards. So the default active item is going to be equal to overview page. So at the beginning, the overview page will be the active page, right? Now we want a method that will allow us to change the active page. Well, to be honest, this doesn't change the active page, but this variable here keeps track of the active route name, right? For example, if the active page is the overview page, here we are going to have the name of the page here. So every single time we change the page, we are going to change the active item name. Now let's create another method, and this method now it's going to allow us to change the name of the item that is being hovered. So basically what's happening here, we are saying that the name of the item that is being hovered is going to be equal to the item name that we pass through this function. But first of all, we want to make sure that that item is not active. Let's define this method here. So now we have these two methods, and what these methods will do is basically here we are going to check if the item name that we provide to this method is the active item, and here we're going to check if the item name provided through this method is the item that is being hovered over. Now let's create a function that is going to return a widget based on the item name. A method actually. Now we have here these two methods, the return item for item name, and here we have custom icon. Why do we have this private method? It's very simple. First, when an item is active, let me open here, you can see that this icon here is slightly bigger than the others. Because of the type of the icon, probably it's hard to see, but this icon is slightly bigger than the others because this is active, right? And when the user hovers on this sub menu items, the item color is supposed to change. So this is what this method does actually. First, we are checking if the item is active. If it is active, we are going to return a widget that is slightly bigger than the others and the color of the widget will be dark. Now, if the item is not active, we are going to return this item, and when we hover over this icon, the color should change to dark, and when we are not hovering over it, the color should remain light gray, right? But this is not all, because now we still need to call this method from somewhere, and we call it from here. Now here we have our return icon for method, and it sounds a bit complex. It looks a bit complex, but it's super simple. We have a switch statement that takes the item name, and depending on the item name, we are going to return a custom icon, right? The item name will always be one of the items, one of these items that we defined here inside of side menu items. So the item name will always be one of this. If it's overview, we will return a trending up icon. If it's the driver, we're going to return the drive ETA. If it's client, people, and authentication, and the default icon, it's going to be this one, right? And if you want to visualize these icons, you can just hover over them, and this is what's going to be returned. Right, almost there. Now we just have to do two things here inside of the constants. Create one file called controllers, and here is where we actually define the controller instances. By doing so, we will always be able to get the instance of this controller from anywhere inside of our app. Now, what we have to do is to register this controller by using get put. So this is everything that we had to do for this lesson, and I know that we did so much and probably it was a bit hard to understand or to follow, but watch this lesson again if you need to understand. Ask me any questions if you need, and there's nothing we can do here. Even if we run the app, nothing is going to change yet, and we are going to make sure that we will visualize all of these changes on our next video. Hello guys, so on this video we are going to be building the side menu, and this is how it works. Basically, we have the hover effect here, and we've been working on this on our last video, and the side menu is responsive as well. Let me just expand this, and you'll see, if you see the icons here, they can change. We have vertically placed icons, and the side menu name. If you extend it further, you have everything horizontally placed. And of course, if you retract this to a mobile size screen, everything disappears, and you can use this to access the side menu items. So this is what we are going to be building on this video. Hopefully you guys are excited. Well, now to build the side menu, there are a couple things that we have to do before, and one obvious step is to build the side menu items. the side menu items are going to change depending on the screen size. So the placement of the side menu items will be horizontally placed, where we have the icon and the item name horizontally, and vertically placed, where we have the icon and the item name vertically aligned. So let's create those files as well. Here we have it. Let's start with the horizontal menu items. So guys, basically this is it, right? I know it's probably too much, but I will try to explain this briefly. Here we have the inkwell widget, and the good thing about the inkwell widget is that we can have the onHover property, and if the hover value is true, we want to change the item that is being hovered. So we are going to change the item that is being hovered to the item name. If it's not being hovered, we'll just set the value to not hovering, right? For the child here, we wrap this inside of OBX because again, this is an observable and the value may change, and when the value does change, we want to keep track of that. That's why we have everything wrapped inside of OBS. And here we have the color of the container containing the submenu item. If the item is being hovered over, we are going to change the background color to a very light gray. If it's not, it's going to be transparent, right? Perfect. Now here we have a widget, which is a container, which is a small bar at the edge of the screen that's going to be displayed when we're hovering on the item. We want to maintain the size, the animation, and the state of this widget. That's why we have this here, right? The return icon for item name, we already defined this on our previous video, but basically we are going to return different items based on the item name. And now finally here for the name, the custom text of the widget, if the widget is not active, if it's not an active item, when we hover over it, it's going to change from this light gray to dark, right? If it is an active widget, we do not want to change it, it's just going to be a dark color. Hopefully you guys understood that. Now let's create our vertical item. The vertical item will be very similar to the horizontal one, so we will just copy and paste stuff around. Ideally, what you would do for the majority of this widget is that you would separate them into different widgets, but that would be extra time for this particular crash course. That's why I'm just copying and pasting items like that. So this is it. We already have the vertical side menu item, and the only difference here really is that here we are using this column here instead of having all of the items inside of a row. So that's basically it, right? Now that we have this, it's time to create our side menu item. And what happens, the side menu item is going to return the horizontal menu item or the vertical menu item depending on the screen size, and this is the logic that we are going to have here. So this is basically it for the side menu item. If the screen size is equal to custom screen size, we are going to return the vertical menu item. Otherwise, we are going to return the horizontal menu item. Now let's build the actually side menu. So basically, after everything, here is where we land, right? We actually have this actual side menu here, right? And all of this is just the design, so I'm not going to explain, but this part here is important because this is where we actually populate our side menu with the side menu items. If you pay close attention, we are using the side menu items. We define this list inside of routes, right? So every single side menu item that it's here, it's going to be automatically populated to our side menu. So let's say we want to add a new item to our side menu item. So the only thing we would have to do is coming here and adding the new item name, and automatically it's going to be displayed on our side menu. Let's actually test all of this now. Now, if you test this, this is going to happen actually. It looks like it doesn't work, but if you shrink the screen size to a small screen size, it works perfectly. And this is a very simple problem to solve. And the problem is here. Inside of our side menu, we have this if statement, right? Which is cool and all, but some stuff here are not supposed to be inside of this widget. So let's remove this column, this divider, and this, and place everything outside of the main column. And just like that, voila, it works. It works perfectly fine. Maybe get rid of this, and it does work. The last thing to do here would be to change the color of our app bar. If we come to layout, remember that I told you guys that we would come back to this to the top navigation bar and change the default background color from white to light. And just like that, this section is working perfectly. Let's try to gradually reduce the size of the screen to see if it's going to affect our side menu items. And it does, just like that. Perfectly fine. Hopefully you guys understood everything on this video, and on our next video we are starting to work on the local navigation. Well, on this video we are going to build the local navigation, and basically what we want to do here, we are going to have our custom navigator that will make sure that when we change from one page, let's say from the overview page to the drivers or clients or any other page, would not reload the whole website but just the portion that we intend to change, right? And to do this, there will be a couple steps, but nothing very difficult. And the step number one will be the creation of a navigation controller. So here we have our navigation controller, and we have the navigation controller instance, right? Now, to use our local navigator, we will need to have a key that we are going to assign to that particular navigator so that the app will know which navigator we want to change screens. For example, when we try to change screens, we want to know exactly from which navigator we are going to change. Now that we have that done, we need two methods, one that will allow us to actually change screens, and the other one that will allow us to go back. So in terms of controllers, this is everything we had to do. Now let's just add one constant with the controller instance and then add this to our main function. So this is it in terms of our navigation controller. This is everything that we had to do. Now let's actually add our navigator. So here we have our file called local navigator and it's inside helpers. Now here we have a method that returns a navigator. There are three things we are going to need here, which are the key, the initial route, and onGenerate route method. Let's start with the key, which is super simple. And the initial route on this case is going to be the overview page. Now let's start creating some extra pages here so that we can actually see the difference. You probably already have the pages folder, but if you don't, just create it. Now, if you have a look here, I have created all of the pages that we are going to use on the project, right? We may add some extra pages in the future, but for the moment, this is everything we need. And if you take a look at the structure, we usually have a folder with the page name and a file that represents the page, right? You are going to understand as we progress with the course why we structured this stuff like this. But what we have to do now, it's basically creating the widgets. So as you guys can see, we already have the widgets here for the pages. Let me just save everything. Now the final thing to do here is to create our the onRouteGenerate function. And to do that, we are going to create a file inside of the routing folder, and we're going to call this file router. So basically here we have two functions, one called generate route that takes a route settings, and from that it's going to return a page route, right? And we have here another function called get page route that returns a page route. It sounds complicated, but let me just continue and you guys will understand in a minute. So here we have the method, and again the generate route, it's going to take the route settings, and from the route settings we are going to get the route name, right? And if it's the overview page route, we are going to return the overview page, and we are going to use material page route to do that, right? So this is basically what this function is going to do. Now we just have to so this is basically everything we had to do here, right? We have the key for the navigator, we have the initial route, and we have the onGenerate method. Now, how do we display this on the app is very simple. We go back to the layout of the app, and for the large screen, instead of just having this container here, we return the local navigator widget by calling this method. And for the small screen, instead of having the container, we are returning local navigator. So this is everything that we had to do. Now let's try to run this code. And if you have a look here, we have changes already, because here we have overview. But the problem here is that if we click on this, nothing is going to change here. We still have overview. We just go to the side menu. We are going to change this. And just like this, now we can test it. As you can see, we are only reloading this section of the website. For the logout, the process is different, because when we do click on the logout item, we do not want to change the things here, but we want to actually reload the whole page and log the user out. That's why we have nothing here. Hopefully you guys understood this one. See you guys on the next one. Hello guys, on this video we are going to build the card overview section, which is this section here. If you pay attention to this, you will notice that it's responsive as well, and it changes. For example, when we have small screens, the widgets will change. If we expand it to a medium screen, now we have the layout of the cards changed, and if we expand this to a large screen, it changes again. So this is what we are going to do on this video. I am at the overview page already, overview file, and the very first thing that we are going to do here is that, as we notice, for the overview cards, the widgets will change depending on the size of the screen. So let's create another folder inside of the overview folder and call that widgets. And the difference here between this widgets folder and this is that this only contains local widgets that are going to be used only on the overview screen. Now here we are going to create 3 files for large screens, medium screens, and small screens. So here we have the overview cards for small, large, and medium screens. Let's start with the large screen. Actually, let's start with the overview screen, and let's change a bit. I say screen all the time, but I mean page. I'm just used to building screens for mobile apps. Let's start here. Now we have our first section here of the overview page. And basically what's going to happen here, as a matter of fact, let me just run the code. And what's happening here, this is the active item overview. If we go to the other screens, well, things are going to change a bit, but this is what we want to have. Now let's continue working. As you can see, this is super down here and we wanted it to be here. To make that possible is super simple. We had to go to the scaffold widget, and here we have a property called extend body behind app bar and set this to true. And what's going to happen here, oops, we still have some improving to do. It vanished, but that's a very easy fix. Here, instead of light color, we're going to set this to colors. And if we control save it, we can see that we have the overview section here. Here, now where we have theme, the theme, scaffold background color, we have set this to white, but actually this is not supposed to be white, but it's supposed to be light. And if we do that, this is going to happen. And you can see that our project is starting to take shape. Let's copy the build method and paste that to the other screens. And what's going to happen now is that we will get the page name automatically by using this code here. As you guys can see, this is working perfectly fine. Now let's actually start working with the cards. So now here, before we build the card section, we have to build the individual cards. Since these cards are very similar, we don't want to repeat this, so we are going to build widgets that we are going to use over and over again. Well, this is everything you will need to do, and here we have the widget. I don't really think there's much explaining to do here, but in case you have any doubts, you can ask me. But this was just styling the widget. Now we're going to build a second one, a widget, the card widget that is going to be displayed on small screens. So now we have both the normal size card and the cards that we are going to use on small screens. Now let's build our overview section for the large screen and run the app to see what happens. So here we have the overview card, the large screen for the overview card. Now let's see how things look like, because we've been writing code for a while now. The only thing to do here really is to call that widget from here. But everything will have to be inside of an expanded widget. And now I will run the code to see what happens. Here we have an error. it says something about the Boolean expression being null, and that's a very easy thing to fix. We just have to add a default value for the isActive variable. And here we have it. If we do this, now we have a problem. So we have to make sure that these cards are able to adjust, and let's do that now. These items are not centered as well. To fix that, just remove this. Here we have it. Now let's make sure that this can adjust to medium screen sizes and small screen sizes. Now this is going to be very similar to what we previously had, so we will copy and paste some stuff here. Now, if you pay attention, we just copied the row, the main widget, from the large screen to the medium screen, because it's basically the same thing. The only difference is that on the medium screen, for each row, we only have 2 items. So here I will get rid of 2 items and separate the rows. Now for the medium screen, this is everything that we need to do. Let's wrap everything up by building the overview cards for small screens. Now here we have the overview cards for small displays, and now we have for every single type of display. The only thing we have to do here is to have the logic on our overview screen, on the overview page, so that these widgets can automatically change depending on the size of the window. So here, instead of having overview cards large screen by default, we are going to have some bit of logic here. So here we have the logic. It looks a bit complex, but it's super simple. First, we are going to check if it's a large or medium screen. Because the funny thing about this project is that the overview for medium screens it starts to be displayed from the custom size. That's why I said that the custom size is specific to this project. So from the custom size, we start displaying the overview for medium screen devices. Else we are going to display for large screen devices. And if it's not a large or a medium screen, means that it's a small screen, we are going to display the overview cards for small screens. And the name of this widget doesn't really look like the other one, so let's change this. And now we have uniformity, which is good. Let's run the app and see if this works. And if you have a look here, it works perfectly fine. We still have some problem here. Here on the small card, the problem is that here we're displaying the title, but here should be the value. And the last thing that we want to fix here is on large screens. Not just large screens really, but here we want to add some padding. And now we are going to do the same thing for small screens. Now let's save everything and test it again. Here we have some padding, same thing here and here. So everything works perfectly fine. On our next video, we are going to build the revenue section here. The good thing is you are going to learn how to add charts to your Flutter web projects. So see you guys on the next one. Hello beautiful people, welcome back. On this video, we are going to build this section here, the revenue section of our admin dashboard. And it's responsive, so we have to make sure we build the two versions for large screens and small screens as well. As you can see, the orientation of the section changes when the size of the screen changes as well. To display the chart is called charts Flutter. You already have this. If you don't, you just have to add this to your pub/spec file. If you click on the online gallery, you can see that here they have a variety of charts to choose from, but on this particular course or on this particular project, we are going to go with the simplest one, which is this one. And to get the example code is very simple. You just have to copy all of this. Now back to the project. Inside of the overview page, we are going to create a new widget and call it bar chart. Now everything is as easy as pasting everything here. Surprisingly or not, this is everything you need to do to have your chart here, and we're not going to go very in depth on how this chart works, but I'll just show you how can you change the values displayed, and here is where you do that. So basically everything that goes into the y-axis are the values, these values here, and the x-axis data is here. So if we run this code, we are going to have something like this. The data on the y-axis will go here, and on the x-axis will go here, and on the y-axis will go right over here. Good. This is everything you had to do in terms of the chart, and let's continue. Now, besides the chart, we have some data, some revenue data, right? And let's create widgets that we are going to reuse to display the revenue data. So here we have the revenue information widget. Now let's actually build the section, the revenue section for large screens and the one for medium and small screens. So basically, this is what we need to have for the section on large screens. Let's run the code and see how this thing looks like. Even before we run the code, there's something that I have to fix here. This is supposed to go inside of the list view, and not outside, just like that. And let's run it now. This is what you have, which is not looking super good, so let's fix this. First of all, this chart here looks strange, so let's just add some random values. Done. And one last thing to do is here on the revenue info, aligning our text to the center and changing the values of our chart should do the job. And perfect, this is what we wanted. Now if we decrease the size of the screen, I mean, it's kind of responsive, right? Kind of responsive, but still not good enough, because when the screen size shrinks very much, for example for mobile devices screen size, if you have a look here, this is unreadable. So let's change this. Now, since the revenue for small screens and the large screen are super similar widgets, the only difference really is the orientation. We are going to copy the code from the revenue section for the large screens. But the rule here is that if you are repeating the widget, if you have to copy and paste, just create another file and make that widget a different widget and call it every single time you need it. Now here we just have to add the logic that it's going to change the widgets automatically. And this is it. Basically, we are saying here, if it's not a small screen, we want to display this big, this large section. If it is a small screen, we want to display the revenue, but the small section widget. Let's run the code, and voila, here we have it. If we extend this, it changes. So this was it. Hopefully you guys understood everything. On our next video, we are going to build data tables. See you guys on the next one. Hello beautiful people, welcome back. On this video we are going to build this data table here using a Flutter package. Hopefully you guys are excited for this, because as you guys can see, our overview section will be done after we do this. So yeah, on this video we are going to use this package here called data table 2. Super simple to use and straightforward. Again, you have to add this package to your pubspec file. I already have that, and probably you do as well. But if you go to your pubspec file, you'll see that we have here data table 2. After that, you just have to copy this code here, and we are going to create a new file, and it's a widget that's going to be present on the widgets folder that's inside the overview folder. So let's call this available drivers, because the idea of this table is to display only the drivers that are available for a ride. Now you just need to copy and paste everything, to be honest, and if you try to run this code, it's going to work. We can test it out. This is what you're going to get with the sample code from the example. Nowhere near where we are trying to go, but already good enough. So what we need to do now is just modifying the columns and the rows of this table and wrap this inside of a container just like the other elements. Now, for this widget, I really feel like there's some explaining to do because it looks like too much going on, but it's super simple. Here we have the normal decoration we used for the other containers, nothing special. And then the child of this container is a column that has a text that says available drivers, basically identifying what data is this table displaying, right? Now here on the table, on the data table, right, we have our columns, which are name, location, rating, and action. And this, you can change this depending on the data that you want to display. But since this is the data we want to display on the columns, this is what we have. And now here we have data cell. Each data cell here will correspond to a column. Sorry. So here we have the first data cell is for the first column, the second for the second. So the number of columns is the same as the number of data cells. Again, this is the data that we are going to be generating automatically, and this is a data row. A data row is composed of different data cells, which are members of the columns. We have here the name, the location. This widget is going to be a star widget, followed by a rating of the driver, and finally we have a custom button. I just made this. But to make everything easier to understand, let me just run the code and show you guys what we have. Now here we have the table, right? And as you can see, these are the columns we defined: the name, the location, rating, and the action. And the number of rows will be 7 because we have this line here that says generate. This is basically the number of data rows that we want to generate, which are 7 rows. And now here are the data cells, right? Exactly like this, right? So this was everything for this video, to be honest, and the overview section is complete. If you do something like this, and let's shrink this to a mobile size screen, you will notice that the table is responsive by default, right? And here's the other data. Maybe we could improve this, but that's not a major problem. But here we have it. Now on the next video, we are going to display tables on the driver and the client pages as well. We are just going to copy paste, to be honest, since this is just some sample data. It doesn't have to be accurate, right? So after that, we are going to build our login screen, and in terms of the UI, I think that will be it. Hello beautiful people, welcome back. Well, on this video we are going to build the drivers and clients page. This is going to be a very short one because this will be a very simple thing to do. So now we've created the custom tables for the driver and the client, and they are both inside of the widgets folder for those respective pages. Now the structure of the pages is extremely similar. So I just went ahead and copied the available drivers table. We renamed that to driver table, and we can remove the column and place and just have here the data table. Now the only thing to do really is to call this widget from the drivers page. And we are going to do the same thing for the client's page. Now let's create the clients table and rename this one, because this is not the table we are going to use, even though they are very similar. Okay, let's save everything and see what happens. Maybe we can change the names here of the buttons. Okay, this is everything that we had to do here, and we are basically done. The only thing left to do really is to create the authentication screen. And here I have block driver, block client, so that we can actually see that these are different tables, and this is it. Let's create the authentication screen now. People, welcome back to the class. On this video we are going to build the authentication page and make it the default page of the project. It's going to be super simple, to be honest, nothing crazy here. We are just going to build the UI, to be honest. So this video is kind of optional because you're not going to learn much new, to be honest. But anyways, if you enjoy watching it, just follow along and let's go. So this is everything you need for the authentication screen, and I know it looks hard or like too much, but it really isn't. Now what's left to do is to make this our default screen and make sure we can access this from the overview screen. And to make that our default screen, as you guys may already know, it's as simple as changing the home here to authentication page. Now the last thing to do is to go to our side menu, and right here and this is basically it. As you guys can see here, we have the perfect example of the local navigation down here and a global navigation up here. Let's save everything and see if it works. We have a problem. Looks like we have a problem. Let's wrap this. And run the app again. Problem solved. And the last thing here is with the button. Problem solved. And this is our authentication screen. All of this code translates to this. And if we click on login, we can come here and let's try logout. Just like that, it works perfectly fine. If you made it this far, I believe that you are already more than ready to build your Flutter web applications. The next sections will be extra classes, right? On advanced navigation and introduction to Firebase. Welcome back. On this video, we are going to have an introduction to URL navigation using getX. If you can see now, we can have the route of the page here, and if we go to our main page here, the route is going to be empty because it's the main page. If, for example, I enter something that doesn't exist here, we are going to have the 404 page not found. And let's say we want to go back to the auth page, we could do it just like this, auth. So this is what we are going to build on this video. Okay, let's do that and you guys will understand in a minute. Here we have the routes file, and let's modify this. So here we have it. We divided each route or menu item into the display name and the actual route that's going to be displayed on the browser. And here we have the class representing each menu that will represent each menu item. Now here where we have side menu items, instead of having a list of strings, we are going to have a list of menu items. And this is everything that we had to do for the routes. And now we have this error on the side menu, which is natural. Now let's save this and fix the issue on the side menu file. Here we have opened the side menu file, and these are the bugs. Let's fix this. The good thing here is that there's no longer, we do not have the need to have the logic here. Now we just call the item name and everything is sorted. The other difference here is that we are no longer working with the normal get, right? We are working with named routing. That's why we changed the previous logic here to of all named, and here we are inserting the authentication page route. We are passing that as a parameter to the of all named method. So first we changed the name of the active item to the overview display name, right? And this is done because after we log out, if we log in again, if we do not change here, the name that's going to be displayed on the overview screen or section is log out, right? It's kind of a bug that I find out when I was building the project, so this will fix the issue. You don't even have to see what's the problem. This is the solution. Fine. You just have to change you just have to replace where you had item name like this with item dot name, right? And in here is the same thing. We want to navigate to a route. That's why we have here item dot route. The final thing to be changed is with the menu controller. So here where we have overview page route, we want to change this to display name, and do the same for the remaining values. Now we have this, we are ready to test the code. Let's see what happens. Save it and run it. So here we have the code, but again, nothing happens here. If we click on login, we have another problem. This problem here. Now it's solved. Okay, we still have some issues to fix. And if you do something like auth for the authentication page, nothing is going to happen. Let's fix the first problem. So we are changing the active item from the route to the display name as well, and this should fix the problem. Now we want to make sure we are able to navigate using the names, using the routes here, right? But before that, let us build the error page so that when a user inserts a route that doesn't exist, it takes the user to the 404 page. Now to make that possible, we will need to add the file. The link of the file will be in the description of this video, somewhere in the lesson, probably down below. We have created a new folder and we have that on our pubspec file. Now this is the file that we are going to display on the 404 page. Again, I have linked this to the lesson. I'll just drag and drop it and That's everything you need to do. Now we are going to create a new page. So here's the page called error page. 404 is the error. So here we have the page, very simple. We just have the image here and text, same page not found. The final modification that we will do is here on the main.dart file. Since we are going to use named routing here, we have to define the initial route, and we can remove the home property. The initial route is going to be the authentication screen for our case. The unknown route property will be responsible for displaying the page not found if the user inserts an unknown route. So again, here we have defined the initial route, the unknown route, and what's good about getX is because it has a lot of features built into it. For the get page, you can define a property called transition, and here the transition is fade in, but you can have a multitude of transitions here. And for the get pages, basically what you're doing here, you are assigning a widget for a route, for every single route the user inserts on the browser. So what we are saying is, if the route is the root route, we want to display the site layout, but if the route is the authentication page route, we want to return the authentication page widget. Very simple, super straightforward. Save everything, run, and see what happens. Right off the bat, you can notice that now we have the route name here. Okay, the route didn't change, which is a problem, but I imagine what happened. If you face this kind of issues where you change the route but it doesn't update on the browser, most likely the problem is this, and I'll show you in a minute. This only works when you are working with the named navigation or named routing. So every single time, this is what you have to do. When you change screens, you have to use named routing, and this changed. Something happens here. If you change here, nothing changes here, but this is because The site layout didn't change. We are changing the widgets inside of the site layout. That's why the route here is not being updated. If we log out, we go back to this one. Let's try to create a route that doesn't exist. And if you do that, this is what you'll see. Page not found. Right. So this was basically it for this video, an introduction to URL navigation on Flutter Web, and I will follow this up with more advanced videos, but this should be good enough for now. Now let's learn about Firebase and deploying the website. And guys, here we have it. We can just click on sign in with Google, insert our email, insert our password, and voila, we are in. This video comes with a written tutorial. You can go to Medium and read the article alongside with the video. Link in the description section. So guys, to start our project off, you're going to type the following command into the command prompt or terminal if you're on Linux. Flutter channel beta, and what this is going to do is change your Flutter main channel to the beta channel. And then after having that done, you're going to type here Flutter upgrade to get the latest version of Flutter. And finally, you're going to type Flutter config -- enable -web to enable Flutter web into your system. To make sure that everything works, you'll need to type Flutter devices, and here has the results. You should be able to see Chrome here, meaning that Flutter web is enabled. Good. After having this out of the way, you are going to Android Studio or Visual Studio and create your Flutter project as you usually do. And after having your Flutter project created here, you'll notice that you have this new folder called Web. Basically, this is because Flutter Web is now enabled. And to run this, you'll have here Flutter run -d Chrome. And just like that, here you have your Flutter web. But since we are trying to save some time, I went ahead and created this Flutter web simple UI, and we are going to start our project from here. To get this is very simple. You just have to go to my GitHub repo. Here on branches, select branch and select the starting template branch, or just use the link in the description section. After you have downloaded the project, you're going to see something similar to this. And no need to worry, there's no backend code here, only the UI. Now open Firebase and create your Firebase project. Disable analytics because we are not going to use that for this project. Go to authentication and enable Google authentication here. After that, we want to enable Cloud Firestore using our test mode. Then let's add our web app here by setting a name for our web app. And then we just need to copy this HTML code into our project. Open up the web folder and index.html and copy it here. Now to complete the Firebase integration, copy these two tags to the bottom of your HTML file here. Copy this tag to the head section of the file to enable Google sign-in on our website. Here we will need the client ID to enable sign-in, so let's get the client ID. Go to the Google Cloud Services website and select the Firebase project that you are currently working on. Go to Credentials, and where it says Auth 2.0 client IDs, you can go and just copy the client ID. Come back to the index.html file and replace the client ID with the actual client ID you just got from Google Cloud Services. Go to pubspec.yaml file and add the following packages: provider, shared preferences, Firebase core, Firebase auth, Cloud Firestore, and Google sign-in. Inside the lib folder, create another folder called helper. And inside of helper, create a file called constants.dart. And inside of this file, we are going to store constant values throughout our app, values that are not going to change and that we are going to need in different files. Let's start off by importing some packages that we are going to use here. Define a variable called initialization to initialize Firebase app, Firebase Firestore to have an instance of Firestore, and auth to have an instance of Firebase Authentication. Let's create a folder inside of lib called models, and inside of models define a file called user.dart. Inside of this file, we are going first of all to import the packages that we need, and we are going to call the class user model, then start defining some constant values that are going to be the same as the fields on our Firebase collection. We have here our private properties, and we're going to access these ones using a getter, and we're going to initialize the values of our properties using this named constructor. Now create another folder inside of lib called services, and inside of services we'll define a file called user.dart. Inside of this file, we will start by importing some packages. First of all, we have the constants. We just created this file, the user from the user models, and finally Cloud Firestore. And then we'll define our class called user services, with collection being the variable called users. Basically, this is the name of the collection that we are going to access on Firebase. And the first thing we want our users to be able to do is to create an account, so we'll create a method called createUser. As you can see, this method takes 3 arguments: the ID of the user, name, and photo of the user. Now we will use this code to create our collection on Firebase or insert a document into our collection if the user's collection is already created. Since we will need to retrieve the user from our Firebase collection, we are going to create this method which is going to get the user by the specific ID. This piece of code will return our user inside of our collection using the document ID. But this is going to return a document snapshot, and the getUserById method is a feature that returns user model. So we'll have to convert our document snapshot to a user model. We already have that code, and we are going to do that by writing here user model.fromSnapshot, and we are going to pass the document snapshot as an argument here. Now we need the method that's going to check if the user does exist, and if the user exists, returns a boolean. And our final method will just get all of the users from our Firebase Firestore collection. But again, this method will return a list of document snapshots, and what we need is a list of user models, because our getAll method will return a future list of user models. So to make that possible, here inside of our then, we will create a list of users, and then we will create a for loop that is going to iterate through our result, which is a list of documents, and we will convert all of those documents into user models and add them into our users list. And finally, we will return our users list. Now, inside of the lib folder, let's create another folder called providers. And inside of our providers folder, create a file called auth.dart. Again, we will need to import packages here into our file, and these packages are going to be used inside of our class. Now here we declare an enum, and what this enum is going to do basically is to have the different status on which the user can be in. Basically, our user can be uninitialized, unauthenticated, authenticated, or authenticating. Here we have our provider, which is a mixing of the change notifier class. And now we will define some private variables that we are going to use here inside of the auth provider and the corresponding getters so that we can access those private variables outside of our provider. Here we have our named constructor, and our named constructor is going to be called as soon as we create our provider. And inside of our named constructor, we have this method called Fire setup, which is going to keep track of the authentication status of the user inside of Firebase. And here we have the definition of our Fire setup method. Inside of it, we are calling initialization, and then inside of the initialization, we are calling off changes listen. Basically, we are listening to changes inside of Firebase in terms of the user authentication. And inside of our listen, we are passing a method which is called onStateChanged. And what's going to happen here is that when the user state changes on Firebase, something must be performed. That's why we are calling this method here. And again, the method is not defined yet. That's why we are having this error, but no problem. We will define this method in a second. And now we have this method here, sign in with Google, and it does just that, signs the user in using Google. The first thing we have here is a try and catch statement. And inside of our try, we are going to define a variable of the type Google sign in account, call it Google user, and it's going to take an instance of Google sign in. And underneath that, we have here Google sign in authentication. We are going to call that variable Google auth, and it's going to take an instance of Google user.authentication. Now we define a variable of the type of credential and assign that the value of Google auth provider.credential. This method takes parameters access token, which is equal to Google auth.access token, and ID token, which is equal to Google auth.id token. And now we are going to call sign in with credential from auth Firebase auth. This takes the credential variable here as a parameter, and it's going to return a user credential. In here, we are going to assign our user, which is our Firebase user, to the user credentials.user. And then we're going to set our shared preference key ID being equal to the user ID. And then we want to check if the user does exist already. If he doesn't exist, what we are going to do is calling user services create user, which is going to create our user inside of our collection. And if it does exist, we'll just initialize our user model. And then we will return a map containing two key value pairs, which is a success status and a message. Here we define our initialize user model method by setting a variable called user ID, which is going to get the value from our shared preference ID. And then we are going to do user model is going to be equal to await user services dot get user by ID. After that, we want to notify listeners of the changes made and check if the user model is null or not. If it is null, return false. If it's not null, return true. Down here, we have our method that's going to be responsible for signing the users out, which is just calling auth.signout and change the status of the user to unauthenticated and notify listeners and return a future. You don't need to return a future here. You can just not return nothing. I just did it for the sake of doing it. Our final method here is onStateChanged, which is going to take Firebase user as a parameter. And here we are going to check if the Firebase user is null. If it is null, we are going to set the status to unauthenticated and notify listeners. If it's not null, we are going to assign our variable user to Firebase user, initialize the user model, wait for 2 seconds, and set the user status as authenticated. Inside of the provider package, we are going to have another file called app.dart. And basically this will keep track of the app status. For example, if we have something loading inside of our app, this provider will notify all of the files of the app that something is loading. Inside of the provider, we are going to import material.dart, and we have here app provider has the name of the provider. It only has one variable called isLoading and one method called changeLoading, meaning that if the app is loading and we call this method, the app will stop loading, and if it's not loading, it will start loading. Now, opening our authentication screen, we are going to import these packages here, and then we are going to declare app provider variable here and auth provider as well. Now, the logic actually is going to be here inside of our gesture detector, where we are going to call app provider.change loading to make sure something is loading. And then for our map result, we are going to assign it with the value of the sign in with Google result, and take the result, which is a map, and assign its values to two variables, one boolean called success and another one called message, which is a string. On our if statement, we are going to check if signing in with Google is not successful. We are going to display a snack bar into the app, and if it is successful, we'll just stop loading and change to the home screen. Now the last step here is to open up dart.main file and clear everything that it's inside of the file. And again, we will start by importing the packages that we are going to use here as always. And then we will define our main method. Inside of our main method, which has to be asynchronous, make sure that we are calling initialization. And this is for Firebase app initialization. And inside of run app, we want multi-provider so that we can register our providers at the highest level of the app, right? And now as a child here, we want material app, and the title of our app is going to be chat room. We have here the theme data and a new widget called app screen controller. And this is how we are going to control which widget is going to be returned based on the user's status. And it's all done inside of this switch statement. Believe me or not, the only thing left to do here is to run the app. Just open up terminal here and write flutter run -d chrome -web -port 5000, and you have to do this to make sure the app is going to run on the correct port and everything is going to work. And guys, here we have it. We can just click on sign in with Google, insert our email, insert our password, and voila, we are in.